Vamos ya, relax.
My name is Ethan Walker, and this happened in October of 2023 in a small neighborhood just outside Knoxville, Tennessee. At the time, I was 29 and working as a home internet technician. My job had me driving all over eastern Tennessee every day, installing routers, replacing damaged lines, and helping people fix connection problems. It wasn't exciting work, but it paid the bills, and I usually got home before dark. A few months earlier, I'd rented a small one-story house on a quiet street. It wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a fenced backyard, and a carport just big enough for my pickup. Most of the people on the street had lived there for years. They kept their lawns clean, waved when they walked their dogs, and mostly kept to themselves. It was the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. The house next to mine had been empty ever since I'd moved in. The owners had moved to Florida after retiring, according to my landlord. The place was supposed to be sold, but every time someone looked at it, the deal somehow fell through. I barely thought about it. The grass got cut every couple of weeks by a landscaping company, but nobody ever stayed longer than 15 minutes. The curtains stayed closed. The mailbox stayed empty. At night, the house looked completely abandoned. That was normal, or at least I thought it was. One Tuesday, I got home around 6:30 in the evening. It had rained most of the afternoon, and everything outside still smelled wet. I parked under the carport and started unloading my tools. While I was grabbing my backpack, something caught my attention. The front door of the empty house was open, not wide open, maybe 6 inches. I stopped for a second. I was pretty sure it had been closed that morning. I figured maybe a realtor was showing the place. It wasn't really my business. I went inside, made dinner, watched part of a football game, and forgot about it. Around 10 that night, I remembered the door. I looked through my front window. It was closed again. No lights, nothing unusual. So I shrugged it off and went to bed. The next morning, I left before 7. As I backed my truck into the street, I noticed fresh tire tracks in the wet driveway next door. There hadn't been a car there the night before. Again, I assumed someone had stopped by. Maybe an inspector, maybe a contractor. My brain found an explanation without much effort. The rest of the week was normal. Work, dinner, sleep. Nothing strange happened. Until Friday night. I'd ordered takeout after work and was sitting on my couch watching YouTube. Around 9:45, I heard what sounded like a metal trash can falling over outside. It was loud enough that I muted the TV. Silence. I waited. Nothing. I figured maybe a raccoon had knocked something over. About 30 seconds later, I heard footsteps. Not running, walking, slow, crunch, crunch, crunch. They sounded like they were crossing the gravel between my driveway and the empty house. I stood up and looked through the blinds. Nobody. The motion light above my driveway had turned on, but the yard was empty. The light stayed on for almost a minute before shutting off. I checked my front camera. Nothing. No person. No animal. Just an empty yard. I convinced myself the camera had probably missed someone walking past. It wasn't impossible. The next morning, I found my trash can standing in the middle of my driveway. I was positive I'd left it beside the garage. I actually laughed. I figured maybe the wind had pushed it. Except, it had no wheels on one side. There was no way the wind had rolled it 10 feet across the driveway. Still, I didn't think much about it. A few days later, I got home later than usual. Almost 8. It was already dark. As I pulled into the driveway, my headlights swept across the front of the empty house. For less than a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind one of the front windows. Just a shape, completely still. I slammed on the brakes, looked again, nothing. The room was dark. I stared at the window for almost a minute before getting out of my truck. I told myself it had been my reflection, or maybe the branches moving in the wind. I wanted there to be a normal explanation. That weekend, I mowed my lawn. My neighbor across the street, an older man named Carl, walked over while I was putting the mower away. We talked about football for a couple of minutes before he casually asked, "You ever notice anyone over there?" He nodded toward the empty house. I looked over. "Not really." He frowned. "I thought I saw lights in there last week." I laughed. "Probably someone checking it out." He didn't laugh back. "Maybe." That was all he said before walking home. Something about the way he answered stayed with me. Monday night, it started raining again. A steady rain that lasted for hours. I was answering emails on my laptop when my internet suddenly went out. That happened once in a while. I walked outside with a flashlight to check the cable box mounted beside my house. Everything looked normal. As I turned back toward my porch, I noticed muddy footprints. They started near the property line between my house and the empty one. Then they crossed my yard, right up to my living room window. Whoever made them had stood there, facing inside. The rain hadn't washed them away yet. I counted 6 clear footprints before they disappeared back toward the neighboring yard. My stomach tightened. Someone had been standing outside my window, close enough to see straight into my living room. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera footage. The video skipped. At 8:17 p.m., everything was normal. The next clip started at 8:31. 14 minutes were simply gone. I refreshed the app. Same thing. The system showed a recording error. That had never happened before. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, before leaving for work, I walked around the side of the empty house. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just wanted to see where the footprints had gone. The backyard was overgrown with weeds almost waist high. Near the back fence, I noticed something that immediately made my stomach drop. One of the basement windows wasn't boarded up like the others. It was open, just enough for someone to crawl through. The dirt underneath was packed down, like people had been climbing in and out for a while. I stood there staring at it for several seconds. Then I heard something, a single, slow scrape. From somewhere inside the house, not loud, just enough to tell me. I wasn't alone. I froze where I was. The sound only lasted a second. It reminded me of a chair being dragged across a concrete floor. I held my breath and listened. Nothing. The basement window stayed open. The inside was too dark to see more than a few feet. I told myself it could have been an animal, a raccoon maybe. Still, I backed away without taking my eyes off the window. As soon as I got in my truck, I drove to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That afternoon, I mentioned it to one of my coworkers during lunch. He shrugged. Probably some homeless guy using the place. That sounded reasonable. It was close enough to downtown that it wasn't impossible. When I got home, I called the non-emergency police line. An officer arrived about 40 minutes later. I showed him the basement window and told him about the footprints. He walked around the property with a flashlight before another officer joined him. They went inside through the front door. I waited in my driveway. About 15 minutes later, they came back out. One of them said they didn't find anyone, just dust, old furniture, and a few broken windows. I asked about the basement. He said it was empty. Before leaving, he told me to call again if I noticed anything else. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. The next few nights were quiet. No footsteps, no strange noises, no lights. I started feeling embarrassed for calling the police. Maybe I really had overreacted. Friday evening, I stopped at the grocery store after work. I was only inside for about 20 minutes. When I got back to my truck, something felt off. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. Then I noticed my driver's seat. It had been pushed much farther back. I always kept it close because I'm only 5'9". Now I could barely reach the pedals. I checked the rest of the truck. Everything looked normal. I even convinced myself I'd somehow moved it without realizing. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The next morning, I decided to install another security camera. This one covered the side of my house and part of the empty property's backyard. It wasn't expensive, but it had motion detection and recorded to the cloud. I tested it a few times before going inside. That night, around 1:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app immediately. The camera was pointed toward the narrow space between the two houses. At first, I didn't see anything. Then a person stepped into view. He wasn't facing the camera. He was wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up. He stood completely still for almost 20 seconds, not moving, not looking around, just standing there. Then he slowly turned his head toward my house. The porch light reflected off part of his face. I couldn't make out his features. He took one step toward my backyard. The video froze. When it came back 3 seconds later, he was gone. I replayed it over and over. There was nowhere he could have disappeared that fast. I called the police again. This time, 2 officers searched the property for nearly half an hour. Again, nothing. One officer suggested it might have been someone cutting through the yards. I showed him the recording. He admitted it looked strange. But without seeing where the man went, there wasn't much they could do. Before leaving, he suggested adding brighter lights around my house. The next day, I bought 2 floodlights. For about a week, everything stayed normal. Long enough for me to think it was over. Then Carl knocked on my door. He looked nervous. I found something. He handed me a folded piece of notebook paper. I thought maybe it belonged to you. I unfolded it. It was a rough sketch of my house. Not a good drawing, just enough detail to recognize it. My truck was parked in the driveway. There was an X drawn beside my bedroom window. No words, nothing else. Carl said he'd found it lying near his mailbox that morning. Neither of us recognized the handwriting. I reported it to the police. They took the paper, but couldn't do much with it. There were no fingerprints they could recover. After that, I stopped sleeping well. Every little sound woke me up. I checked my cameras constantly. I started locking doors I'd never bothered locking before, even during the day. One rainy Tuesday, I got home early because one of my appointments had been canceled. As I walked toward my front porch, I noticed something sitting against the door. A small brown paper bag. Inside was a flashlight. Mine. The same flashlight I'd lost almost 3 weeks earlier. I'd searched my truck, my garage, even my work van. I never found it. Until then. There wasn't a note. No fingerprints that the police could find. Just my flashlight. Someone had taken it, and someone had returned it. which meant whoever it was had been close enough to my front door to leave it there without being seen. That night, I didn't stay at the house. I drove to my brother's apartment across town. The next morning, I checked my cameras. At 2:13 a.m., a figure walked across my front porch. The hood was up again. The person stopped at my front door, then leaned forward, not knocking, not trying the handle, just standing there, almost like they were listening. After nearly 2 minutes, they stepped away. Before leaving the porch, they looked directly into the camera. This time, the infrared caught part of their face. A middle-aged man, thin, short beard, sunken eyes. He smiled, not a normal smile, just enough to let me know he knew the camera was there. Then he walked off screen. Police searched again. Dogs were brought in this time. The trail led into the woods behind the empty house, then disappeared near an old drainage ditch. The officers couldn't explain why. One detective asked me a question that stuck with me. Has anything inside your house ever been moved? I immediately thought about my truck seat, then my missing flashlight. I slowly nodded. His expression changed. He told me to make a list of everything that had ever gone missing, even small things. That afternoon, I started checking closets and drawers. I was halfway through my guest bedroom when I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. The attic access panel in the hallway ceiling was hanging open just a few inches. I was absolutely certain it had been closed when I left that morning. I stood there staring at the attic panel for several seconds. I knew I had closed it before leaving for work. I grabbed a stepladder from the garage and climbed up with a flashlight in one hand and my phone in the other. The second I pushed the panel open, a strong smell hit me. It smelled like old wood, damp insulation, and something that had been sitting there for a long time. I slowly shined my flashlight across the attic. At first, I didn't see anything. Then the beam landed on a pile of blankets in the far corner. There were empty water bottles, canned food, a sleeping bag. Someone had been living above my ceiling. My heart started pounding. I called 911 without taking my eyes off the attic. As I backed down the ladder, I heard a noise above me, a slow shuffle. Someone was still up there. I ran outside, locked myself in my truck, and waited for the police. Within minutes, 3 patrol cars arrived. The officers entered my house with weapons drawn while I watched from the driveway. For several minutes, everything was silent. Then I heard shouting, a loud crash. Someone started running across the attic. An officer yelled, "He's moving!" A man burst through the attic access and jumped into the hallway before trying to escape through the back door. He never made it. The officers tackled him in my kitchen. When they brought him outside in handcuffs, I recognized the face immediately. It was the same man who had smiled into my security camera. The police later told me he was 52 years old and had a long history of burglary and trespassing across 3 states. He had been living inside the abandoned house next door for weeks. After noticing that I lived alone, he found a way into my attic through a small gap where the 2 roofs nearly touched. According to investigators, he had been watching my schedule every day, waiting until I left for work before quietly entering my house. That's how my flashlight disappeared. That's why small things were moved. That's why my cameras kept catching him around the property. The sketch of my house, the footprints, and the paper bag were all his way of letting me know he was there. The detective later admitted something that still bothers me. The first 2 police searches never included my attic. No one thought to look there. I moved out less than a week later. The empty house was demolished a few months afterward. Sometimes people ask why I still keep security cameras inside my home instead of only outside. I never tell them the whole story, because the last thing the detective showed me was a notebook they found in the attic. Most of it was filled with random notes about my daily routine. When I got to the final page, there was only one sentence written across the middle. He still hasn't noticed how many times I watched him sleep